Greetings and welcome to In Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Now, CAISO continues to expand access to wholeness, justice, and the social services to marginalized groupings. Research and Program Officer Kellog Nkemakolam, as well as Research and Admin Associate Chinyere Brown, they join us now to discuss the Wholeness and Justice Program. So we want to say welcome to you both and thank you for making the time. But let me start off with you, please, Mr. Nkemakolam. Established in 2020. Do you see more or less need now for the Wholeness and Justice Program? And what reason do you give for your answer?
I wouldn't say that there is, that's that question, my response would neither be a yes or a no. I think what happens is that what we're seeing now is a validation of the needs that we've known for quite some time that LGBTQI plus people in Trinidad and Tobago have with access to resources as well as access to services in relation to human rights violations that they experience.
All right, thank you so much. Ms. Brown, let's bring you in. And have there been any, and this is over the same 3-year period, even though, yes, there's that validation, but has there been any change in the methodology, the approach to developing analysis, alliances, and advocacy over this time?
Well, I would say that the work of Wholeness and Justice definitely continues in a way that we see the needs that have been previously mentioned expanding. And I think that, particularly over the COVID period, there was definitely a way that we began to look at some of the needs and what we could best do to supplant them. And I think that, as Kellogg would have mentioned, our work in that vein really does continue.
Yeah, if I may add as well,
Please.
I think just in doing the work every day and just continuing to see and experience, the community's needs, the program as well as CAISO as an organization really tries to, respond in different ways. So it grows with our methodology grows with, the program as it grows and as we continue to understand and see the different needs that folks have. So.
And does one thing feed into the next in the sense that if there is a group or if there's an individual certain grouping that has received access, that has discovered that there's this possibility in terms of this program, is capacity built so that they're able to, one, reach out, or two, reach back and help the program? What is that like? Is there any sort of cross-pollination, I think, going on like that?
One of the things that the program really aims to do, outside of just responding to the violations experienced by folks, is also, we do that in a way to promote self-empowerment and self-advocacy. And so what we find as well is we've had a number of community members as well who are clients or who were clients of the program that have engaged in social justice advocacy after experiencing just how transformative that kind of work can be for themselves and for, their loved ones and just community members in general. So yes, the program really aims to involve community members in the work of, responding as well as just advocating for the inclusion of, sexual orientation, gender identity, and the understanding of those things in our national landscape.
No vex with Ms. Brown. I'm just going back to following up a question from Mr. Nkemakolam, in the sense that I like the fact that you said who are or who have been clients. And sometimes when you have certain situations, you find that you need to journey a little longer with an individual or with or persons. And I'm not asking you to read and spell any specific situations, or what are some of the types of situations that you can have someone engage with the program and then they're facilitated in such a way that they don't necessarily need to engage with the program the same way after?
One of the things would actually be with social services navigation. That's one of the key areas that we have identified in doing the work that a number of community members need. And that's included in our insights report, which is on our website. And so what we have done is, what our caseworker in particular continues to do is assist people in moving through and navigating different social services, which can range from just institutional stuff like trying to get a birth certificate to accessing national grants, food support. And so in one of the work that we do is by providing food support through food cards to community members and persons in need. And so what we've been doing is, what we've done from that is we've been able to build a guide like this, the Social Services Navigation Guide, which was launched this week, to include folks and kind of like teach them and empower them and give them the kinds of information that they need to when accessing social services. And the community members were a big part of that process. We held on quite a couple consultations with the community to identify the needs that they have, the issues that they've experienced while navigating social services, so that as a result, the resource guide that we launched is responsive to those needs and also points out the challenges and provides recommendations on those things.
And with that, let me ask you about that guide a little bit, because yes, you said it's on the website, and that website is CAISOTT.org. That's CAISOTT.org. But Ms. Brown, tell me a little bit about the guide, please. What led up to it, and what does it address?
So definitely with this guide, we kind of are thinking about the way that both the resources that Wholeness and Justice provide and those that are provided by by the government through national grants are really essential for the general public. And when we were creating the guide, we really saw that there might be gaps that could be filled in terms of how folks come to know about accessing this kind of information, right? So we know that trying to access services sometimes can be a complex process, and that if you are a part of a marginalized community, and when we're thinking particularly about the LGBTQI plus community, we know that there are different social barriers that sometimes arise that we hope that the guide will help to kind of minimize. And so we think about things like access to internet, right? So if I'm someone who's applying for a public assistance grant, for example, I might be having issues with even having things like internet, having funds to pay those kind of bills. If a lot of the information that is needed resides on the internet, then folks will run into barriers like that. So we hope that, for example, the guide is a physical resource that folks can engage with. But I would say even beyond that, there are a lot of barriers that we see in terms of even some of the steps that one can take to be able to do that, right? So as we were producing this guide, we've seen things like folks would have to try to figure out what it means to gain support if spouses, for example, are a large part of this. I think particularly for the community, when questions like that arise, a guide like this is helpful. We also know that being part of marginalized communities means that sometimes access to jobs and other things that might increase your level of poverty might be things that people are tackling. And so we know that particularly for these groups, some of these assistance grants might be very necessary.
And I like the fact that you raised the point of guides being physical as well, because sometimes it's a problem just to get on to access them in a digital space. I also appreciate the fact that you spoke to that, and nuance, that wrinkle is too flippant a word to me, but the fact that power can change a little bit if you power or agency in terms of getting access if you are a member of a marginalized grouping. But I really want to know who are some of the people that really came together to help this guide come about and be a physical, tangible thing. But we do that when we return from this break. We are speaking with Chinyere Brown as well as Kellog Nkemakolam. We are having a discussion looking at the ways that the Wholeness and Justice Programme are just benefiting the society. Stay with us, we return with more. Welcome back. We are having a discussion with Research and Program Officer Kellog Nkemakolam, as well as Research and Admin Associate Chinyere Brown. We are speaking about the Wholeness and Justice Programme coming out of CAISO TT, CAISO Sex and Gender Justice. Remember, you can check them on their Facebook at CAISO, their Twitter and Instagram, or should we say X, CAISO TT. The website is also CAISOTT.org. But I want to get an idea of who are some of the players involved. And I'll ask you, please, Mr. Nkemakolam, in terms of partners, stakeholders, everyone, people who had a hand involved, even from the aspect of research, to make sure that access is something that is enlarged.
Yeah, this was definitely a collaborative process by a big group of people. I think to begin with, my team members that were involved with Chinyere Brown and our community caseworker, Ray Alabi. This work really, like I mentioned earlier, comes out of the work that Ray does as our community caseworker and what she's noticed in terms of communities' engagements with social services and her experience as well in trying to assist community members in engaging and navigating through social services. So the guide itself has a number of tips that she recommended based on her experience doing the work as well. And while Chinyere Brown, she really went in and looked at the information that's available online because it's kind of, well, one would like to think that it's public access because it's online, but like she mentioned, because people have issues in terms of reliable internet access and even understanding the language or the ways that the information about the grants and the other social services are languaged on the websites that they are hosted on. So she did a lot of that translating as well as the graphic work. So the guide looks as good as it does because of Chinyere's artistic eye. But outside of that as well, we had engagement, like I mentioned earlier, with community members. So one of the things we did in moving through this process was we had a consultation session with that was open to community members to join. And in that, we really, we really talked about folks' experiences with navigating social services. What are some of the qualms that they have? What are some of the real life challenges that they've experienced while accessing these social services, and what are some of the barriers that they experience and the things that impede and hinder their access to the social services? So that was really helpful in helping us shape how the guide is directed and the information that we provide on the guide. But more than that, we had a separate session as well with different service providers from different social services, national social services, as well as stakeholders relating to like LGBTQI plus community and marginalized groups, including people living with HIV. And so we really got assistance from other CSOs and NGOs in Trinidad and Tobago who are doing this work with different marginalized communities and who also have, something to say and to add to, how systems can be better and recommendations that can be done or that can be put forward and also in building a guide that really answers and speaks to the different marginalized groups that are involved. Yeah, so that was really it. It's taken us quite some time. It really was intentional process that because there were points where we would have, thought we were like finished with something, but after engaging with folks, we're like, okay, well, this thing needs to clearly be said, or this needs to be done. But also just even practically as well, the way that the guide is formatted really allows folks to interact with it at face value. So they're able to just on the face of it, see, okay, these are the things that I need to access this particular grant. These are the grants that are available. This is how I could be eligible for this thing. And so, yeah, it really was an intentional process that involved collaboration with a number of people, too many to name.
And I really like the fact that you took speaking to that level of intentionality. Sometimes, and it can be something that is not intentional, but because your passion project is your passion project, your objective is your objective, sometimes you put blinkers on so that we don't speak to other persons or groupings who are going through some of the same challenges, trying to make some of the access, but serving a different community. So the fact that you had these different CSOs engaging with you, saying, okay, well, these are some of the things that we're trying to do, and these are some of the challenges, or these are some of the ways that we're addressing them, I think is really important. And yes, that may make the process happen with a little longer period of time, but at the same time, I think you go further with it. But I want to ask you, Ms. Brown, what was the thing that you found a little or most challenging to you during this process in terms of like getting it on board to the level that is at, where it has that information, two, it seems as though it may be very user-friendly, and three, it's kind of pretty, according to what Mr. Nkemakolam is saying?
Yeah, so I think really at the heart of this project was the people, right? A deep concern, engagement, love for community members in a way that centers their needs. And so I think in terms of challenges, then what becomes most challenging is when we found that there were some barriers to making things easy, and also hoping for a process that wasn't really full of shame. I think a lot of the times when we talk about accessing grants, when we talk about that kind of process, folks often are made to feel like this might be something that you should feel badly about, that, this is not a human right, but everybody deserves access to food, shelter. And so as we went through this guide and the information that existed to populate it, it was really obvious that in some places, grants ask for a lot of information, things that might be very personal, things that might be difficult to keep record of, particularly even with the LGBTQI plus community. There are possible estrangements with family, depending on what kind of responses folks might have received from them. And so we know that getting access to this grant sometimes asks for that kind of uncomfortable interaction. So I would say that one of the things that was the most challenging is really finding ways to communicate what is needed, but make sure that it is done in a way that really emphasizes the importance of the person, despite some of the challenges they might face in the process of getting things done, and making sure that things were really user-friendly in terms of being able to understand exactly what this thing might need, or understand the processes to get there. And I would say also, we sometimes have to deal with some of the assumptions, for example, that someone might be cohabitating with somebody that is the opposite sex of them, and that's what creates a family. And so kind of really navigating those meanings and trying to help folk be in the best place to do that themselves.
Thank you so much for that. We have about a minute more, and I'll leave it to you to close, Mr. Nkemakolam. But the fact that we spoke about physical copies, I want to ask how they're accessible as well. Is it that is it that the caseworker Ray Alibe will be linking with people who would have been engaged with previously? So give me that information as well as closing comments. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. The guide, as I mentioned earlier, is available on our website, but also the guide will be made available to clients of the program, as well as folks who interact with the program or engage the program primarily for social services navigation. And well, if anybody has any information that they want about the guide or even how to access it, they can always send us an email at wholenessandjustice@CAISOTT.org or give us a call at 28-CAISO. But I want to close by emphasizing what Chinyere just said about, the shame and the stigma that's usually attached to folks who need and want to access social services. I think it's very important to emphasize that national social services are for everybody. And so if you are having challenges accessing food, accessing shelter, accessing housing, and all these other things that a person needs to, live a fulfilling life, the national social services are there for you, and you should always feel comfortable, and securing yourself that knowing that this is what our governments are meant to do. It's part of their responsibility to you. And so they're there for you to access, and you should definitely feel free to. And if you would need some kind of assistance or just some kind of information about, the things that you might need for these things, this is what the guide is for. And I also want to urge social services providers as well. I think they have a big responsibility in terms of how people feel when accessing these social services. And so, creating an environment that's free of stigma and discrimination based on any status, including sexual orientation and identity, that's important to make sure that people are comfortable while accessing these spaces, and that, the information that people need is there just to make the process easier and better for everybody. So yeah, that's really what I have to say. And I also want to thank my team as well for the work that they've put into, making this guide a reality, as well as all the people who helped us in this process. There's not enough thanks that I can say, but just thank you to everyone, and thank you for having us.
And we want to thank you, Kellog Nkemakolam, as well as you, Chinyere Brown, and for the work that you're doing, the work you and your partners are doing. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth with me. Thank you so much for joining.